How did I end up in regenerative medicine? Hi, and welcome to the channel. My name's Jed, and I want to start by just taking a few minutes to introduce myself, tell you why I'm here, and why I'm starting this channel. Now, you might be asking yourself, Jed, what is regenerative medicine? And more importantly, how can it help me? Well, first things first, I think you need to start by asking yourself, why am I looking into regenerative medicine in the first place? See, if you're here, I'm guessing it's because you or someone close to you is dealing with a serious health challenge. Maybe you have a loved one who's passed away. Maybe yourself, you're dealing with some type of chronic illness. And in your search for answers, you become, let's just say, disenchanted with the healthcare system. Maybe you're an athlete. Maybe you're an executive. Maybe you're a business owner. And you're really just looking to optimize your performance, and maybe you're looking to take your health in your own hands. See, only you can determine why you're here and ultimately what you're going to do with the information that you'll get here. But for me, well, let's just say I've got a bit of a bone to pick. I'm here to shed a little light on the darkness. I'm here to give you hope. Just like a craftsman uses the tools in his toolbox to build a strong home, see, I'm here to give you the tools that you need to build your own strong life. I believe if we can build strong people will build strong relationships. Strong relationships will lead to strong families. Strong families will build strong communities. And strong communities, well, they could change the world. And isn't that why you're here? You've been searching for something to fight for? So why don't you join me? Let's grow stronger together. Let's grow healthier together. And let's fight for freedom together. I want to ask you this. What criteria does someone need to meet in order for you to listen to them? Is it life experience? Is it credentials? If it's credentials, prepare to be underwhelmed and maybe even a little disappointed. I'm not a doctor. I have no medical training. I barely passed college. So based on that criteria, you probably shouldn't listen to me. Now, if we're going to use life experience, that's a different story. See, the first thing I've learned is that practical knowledge always trumps theoretical knowledge. How, you might ask? Well, practical knowledge has been put to the test and theories have not. So how does a theory get tested? In the real world. What's the result? Understanding. See, theoretical knowledge only becomes practical knowledge once it has passed the test of real-world application. So how does someone gain understanding, you might ask? Easy. Through life experience. If we're going to use life experience as the criteria, well, that's something I have a lot of. How, you might ask? Well, I've done a lot of things. I've worked in a lot of different industries, from electronics to aviation, to forestry, to construction, to the military. I own a couple businesses, and most recently I found myself in regenerative medicine. So here's the second thing that I've learned about all these different industries. They're really not all that different. All industries have problems, and all problems involve people. People either cause, they identify, or they solve the problems. The third thing that I've learned is that in every industry, there are 4 types of people. First, there's the problem makers. They either intentionally cause problems with the intent to destroy or inflict damage, or they unintentionally cause problems, maybe due to laziness or lack of planning. Second, there's the problem avoiders. They go to great lengths to avoid all problems that come their way. Then there's the problem amplifiers. See, they make every problem bigger than it is. They have a way of making mountains out of molehills. Finally, there's the problem solvers. These people, they take action. They see problems as opportunities to innovate and to make things better. So what's the fourth thing I've learned? Well, it's that in every industry, there are more problem makers, problem avoiders, problem amplifiers, than there are problem solvers. Why, you might ask? Well, that leads to the fifth thing that I've learned, and it's that people aren't taught to solve problems. People are taught how not to get in trouble. Back to the question, why would you listen to me? Well, I'm one of the problem solvers. The greatest gift my father ever taught me was to trust in God above all else and to love your neighbors as yourself. The second was how to solve problems. See, he would say, Jed, for every problem, there's always a solution. You just have to look hard enough. And he would say, if something's broken, don't wait for someone else to fix it. You fix it. So after a lifetime of seeing problems in the healthcare system, I'm here to try to fix it. So what are the problems? That's a good question. And I think to answer it, I need to start with my own story. As a kid, I had a variety of health problems. When I was younger, I was identified as having a learning disability. I struggled with simple things like reading, math. In addition to learning problems, I had unexplained sicknesses, I suffered from allergies, I had idiopathic skin issues, and I had some other symptoms that just seemed to come and go. I always thought something was off, but I could never just put my finger on it. Neither could the doctors. My parents got responses like, he's just a kid and kids go through things and changes. It's nothing really to worry about. See, it wasn't until years later that we actually discovered there was a mold issue in my home, specifically in my bedroom. And it wasn't until a few years ago that I understood how much mold can negatively impact your health, especially at a neurological level, a hormonal level, and in the inflammatory pathways within the body. See, another problem after that arose, though, in 2012. It started with a missions trip, first to Haiti and then Zambia. When I was returning home, I ate some contaminated food at the airport. And I'll spare you the details, but let's just say I became one of the best friends with the Delta Airlines onboard lavatory. Now, this is where the issue really started, but it's certainly not where it finished. See, my symptoms remained long after I returned home. And when I went to the doctors, they ended up doing some tests, and the tests came back negative. I was then passed on to the infectious disease specialist over at the Ottawa General, where I waited for months to get an initial appointment. Once I finally got in, they did more tests, where I found out the results were negative. I should give the doctor some credit here, though, because even though the tests were negative, she did prescribe a drug called Flagyl. See, she figured I had Giardia lamblia, a parasitic protozoan infection common in both Haiti and Zambia. The problem is that my symptoms remained. The other problem is that the longer I waited, the more I realized my symptoms correlated more closely with a helminth parasitic infection, like a hookworm or a roundworm. Both are common in Haiti and Zambia, and both are difficult to spot in tests due to the fact that they have intermittent egg shedding. I kept bringing this up, but I kept getting the same response. Well, if you had one of these infections, they would show up in your blood work or on your stool tests. Most parasitic drugs, they only kill the adult worms, not the eggs themselves. Therefore, you need multiple treatments, the first round to kill the adult worm, the second round to kill the larva before they can lay more eggs. Otherwise, you'll just keep getting reinfected. So I kept bringing this up, but I kept getting the same responses. Well, a parasitic infection, it should show up in the blood work or in your stool tests. But they never did. So they never treated it. But I kept asking. So finally, I think in an attempt to probably silence me, she gave me some more Flagyl. Well, that was effective. Maybe not at treating my symptoms, but definitely at silencing me. After that, I was done. That round killed any remaining healthy flora I had in my system. And by this time, I felt even worse than I did at the beginning. So honestly, I was just done. I was done with having conversations that didn't go anywhere. And I was just done with not feeling like I was being heard. But I will say this, if I'm really being honest, it wasn't entirely their fault. Ultimately, I was responsible for how I responded to my health problems. And at that time, I just didn't respond very well. I was so focused on my physical health that I started to neglect my psychological health. And I found myself slipping into a depression. I started to lose hope. Next, I started to neglect my emotional health. I became less social, and I intentionally isolated. I constantly reinforced a very dangerous narrative to myself. I felt like no one really understood how I felt, which ultimately is a lie. See, the more I focused on my health, the worse I felt. The worse I felt, the more depressed I became. The more depressed I became, the less social I became. The less social I became, the more isolated I became. The more isolated I became, well, the more selfish I became. And the more selfish I became, the more focused on my health I became. Do you see the loop I was stuck in? Now, you're probably asking yourself, well, how did it all get resolved, Jed? Well, remember that greatest gift I told you that my dad gave me? Trust in God and love others. Well, here's what I didn't let go of during all that time. It was my spiritual health. Doesn't mean I didn't wrestle with God, and it certainly doesn't justify my own bad behavior. I kept asking God, why is this happening? And he kept saying to me, Jed, trust me. Take your eyes off yourself. Both are frustrating answers. But it worked. Now, it didn't mean that my symptoms just totally disappeared, but they certainly did improve. And as I reflect now, even though it was a difficult time, it taught me some really important lessons. First, it taught me to be more empathetic, especially toward people who are sick. Second, it taught me the importance of full faceted health. Third, it taught me to be more grateful. And it taught me to help more people. The fourth and final is that it taught me that mainstream medicine doesn't always have all the answers. Sometimes it dismisses things it can't fully understand. When my wife was in her final year of high school, she was diagnosed with low ferritin levels. When did she find out? Well, she was a long distance runner, and during the final 100 meters of one of her races, she just seemed to pass out. It was like she had nothing left in her tank. Her parents took her to the hospital where they ran some blood tests, and that's where they discovered she had low ferritin levels. Now maybe you're asking yourself, why did she have low iron? And honestly, I don't really know. We never found out. See, diagnosing low iron in the first place is not very straightforward. It's kind of like looking for a needle in the haystack. My issue actually is not that they never found out the cause, it's that they wouldn't look or think outside the box. See, Hannah's story was eerily similar to mine. Started out with blood work, then waiting for a call about the results. But they can't give the results over the phone, so you're waiting for another appointment with the doctor. Then once you get to the appointment, they tell you what the results are. And for her, they kept being low. So she just kept waiting and going on different types of supplements. Then she waited for months to get more results, just to find out things barely changed. The solution was always just try another iron supplement. And I kept asking, well, what about absorption issues? Maybe she has a parasitic infection. Maybe it's because she's an athlete. All of my ideas were always shut down though, because again, I don't have the credentials. So the response from them was always, well, all of her other markers are good, so why would we check if something else is wrong? Besides, she's a woman and premenopausal women are susceptible to low iron. I hated getting that answer. It's like, the simple answer must be the right answer because the alternative to that is kind of a lot of work. This was just another example of them trying to justify why they couldn't fix the problem. So what happened? Well, this went on for years until finally she got into the range. Now, how much inside the range, you might ask? Well, the normal range is between 20 and 300 nanograms per milliliter. And for Hannah, she started at 4 nanograms per milliliter, and she finally got up to 22 nanograms per milliliter. She was 2 points inside the range. But here's the thing, she still felt awful. She was still exhausted, and her performance didn't improve. When we asked the doctor what was going on, he just looked at the numbers and he said, well, that doesn't make sense. She's inside the range. So I started to ask the real question. Why does she feel awful when she's inside the range? The reason is that the average range doesn't mean the optimal range. Let me explain. I'm no specialist, but common sense, it just kept making me think that being 2 points inside the range must not be the optimal range. So I asked, how did they come up with the range in the first place? The answer I got was the Gaussian distribution model. Here's how it works. It starts by collecting a lot of data from a broad range of people. So for iron, they take a lot of participants and they look at their ferritin levels. The data is then broken down into two groups, both men and women, and then it's broken down into multiple age groups. The results are then plotted on the chart, which forms a bell-shaped curve. Then the central 95% of values create the reference range. So what are those values? Well, there's a lot. So for now, we'll just look at a few. Adult men, adult women, both premenopausal and postmenopausal, between the ages of 19 and 65. For adult men, it's anywhere from 30 to 300 nanograms per milliliter. For premenopausal women, it's anywhere from 20 to 150 nanograms per milliliter. And finally, for postmenopausal women, it's anywhere from 30 to 300 nanograms per milliliter. So you might be asking yourself, well, what's the issue, Jed? Sounds like they're just gathering a bunch of data and they're coming up with the averages. Isn't that exactly what we should be doing? And I would say you're not wrong, but it really depends on what outcome you're trying to achieve. See, for Hannah, she wasn't trying to be average. I mean, how many people do you know that on average go for a 22-kilometer off-day run? Not many. A car wouldn't run without adequate fuel, so why would she be able to run without adequate iron? So logically, I thought, if she's feeling so bad at the bottom of the range, maybe she'd feel better at the top end of the range. Now, I realize some of you are thinking, well, Jed, haven't you heard of hemochromatosis? And don't you know it can lead to polycythemia? And I'll start by just saying, yes, I've heard about it, but that's not really my point. My real point is that as a competitive athlete, you will never be optimized if you keep being stuck at the bottom of the reference range when it comes to iron levels. So back to the Gaussian distribution model and the fundamental issues I have with the averages. Here's why. I think we can all agree that the average North American isn't a pillar of health. But Jed, I'm average. Are you saying I'm not healthy? Well, if we're going to stick to the numbers, then yes, but that's okay. I still love you. See, gymlist.org published a survey in 2021. The purpose was to provide insight into average fitness levels of Americans. So what were they looking for? How many push-ups can someone perform? Let's just look at 10 push-ups or less. The results: 53.8% of Americans can do 10 push-ups or less. What if we increase the number? 20 push-ups or more? That one's even more surprising. See, only 22.4% of American adults can do more than 20 push-ups. According to the survey, over half the population is unable to do 10 push-ups. And over 3/4 of the population is unable to do 20 push-ups. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, Jed, there's no way I could do 20 push-ups. In fact, I'm not even sure if I could do 10 push-ups. Should I be concerned about my health? Well, not necessarily. Like I said before, it's really about the outcome you're trying to achieve. See, my point here is that we've become obsessed with looking at empirical data, the numbers, and we've forgotten that the numbers reflect a group of our society that may be largely unhealthy, or at least they're not pushing themselves to their limit on a regular basis. See, a reflection of the average healthy American is not necessarily a reflection of the ideal healthy American. An athlete like Hannah, who's pushing her body to exhaustion regularly, she's going to have entirely different iron needs than someone who can't do 10 push-ups. However, the medical system, well, it treats them all the same. See, this is really why she felt awful, because for her, this wasn't ideal. So what happened? Well, we finally saw a doctor who said, I don't treat the numbers, I treat the patient. That was a game changer for her. He told her, this has gone on for way too long, we're just going to give you an iron infusion. And when you know it, after the infusion, her levels increased. Within weeks, she went from being the bottom 5 on her team to the top 5 of her team. Her energy returned, her performance skyrocketed, all because we found a doctor who said, I'm not going to treat the numbers, I'm going to treat the patient. My father's battle with brain cancer exposed more problems. See, after Hannah, my father was diagnosed with a glioblastoma tumor. It's an aggressive form of brain cancer. And by this time, I realized when it comes to your health, you really have to be your own advocate. See, with my dad, I was at a point where I wasn't prepared to wait, so I started to look for alternative solutions. I researched immunotherapy, experimental treatments, and other new medical approaches. And I finally came across an experimental treatment that was happening at Duke University. Could this be the answer? I had a lot of hope, but it was just too late. By this time, my dad had 2 brain surgeries, he had 2 bacterial infections, and 2 fungal infections. See, after all that, he was just too weak to travel. I tried, but I couldn't help him. In July of 2016, he passed away. He was in the home that he built with his wife and children by his side. That was a hard one. I lost one of my heroes. So what did I do next? Well, I remembered what he taught me. Trust in God above all else. And what happened? Well, it gave me hope. Hope that I'd see him again one day. And hope that his passing would not be in vain. Now, it doesn't mean I didn't wrestle with God. Of course, I asked God, why would you let this happen? And he kept answering me, you're not asking the right questions, Jed. So I started asking deeper questions. How do we not see this sooner? Why didn't I push him harder to go and do more tests? And see, the more I looked, the more I saw how deeply flawed the system was. He was a business owner. He worked long hours. And when he felt tired or unwell, we just seemed to explain it away. Stress, long days, not getting enough sleep. These are just some of the excuses we use to justify the changes in his behavior leading up to his diagnosis. Sometimes denial blinds you from the truth. But that wasn't the only issue. See, the system made it incredibly difficult for him to take time off and prioritize his health. Every trip to the doctor meant losing an entire workday. And when you're running a business, it's not just an inconvenience, it means customers don't get helped, work doesn't get done, and you start to fall behind. To add insult to injury, he suffered for years with psoriasis. He saw multiple specialists, and they never really gave him great answers. So, as you can imagine, he started to lose faith in the healthcare system. So, how did this point me towards regenerative medicine? Well, the frustrations I saw my dad's experience, it wasn't unique to me. So I couldn't help but ask, how many people are in the same position as him? How many people are developing serious conditions and falling through the cracks? Simply because the system isn't designed to catch things early enough. Why are things like autism, cancer, Lyme's disease, metabolic syndrome, congestive heart failure, diabetes, ALS, MS, lupus, and other autoimmune diseases, things like Alzheimer's and dementia and other neurodegenerative diseases on the rise? Is it really that we're just better at detecting these diseases? Could it be the aging world population? Or could it really be that our approach to health is all off? See, what would happen if we just took a different approach? What if we stopped these problems before they even happened in the first place? What if we were more proactionary rather than reactionary when it comes to healthcare? This is ultimately what led me to regenerative medicine. I heard stories about people being cured of diseases. Even more than being cured, I heard of people thriving. That's when I realized this is the future of medicine. So what were they doing? And what were they using? Well, they were using things like stem cells, exosomes, peptides, other natural therapies, and even some drugs. And for some reason, all these things were deemed as extremely controversial, experimental. So I started to ask the question, if people are getting better, why are they so controversial? If they're working, why aren't they more available? And see, this is really what I discovered. Nothing in life is free, especially healthcare. And the other things I discovered, they're actually far more concerning than you might think. But we'll have to get into that next time. For now, why don't you click like and subscribe? Because we're just getting started.